Good morning to everyone. And what we're doing in this class is we're going through the Middle-Length Treatise on the Stages of the Path to Enlightenment by Lama Tsongkhapa. We've been doing this for more than a year and a half now, so we're getting quite close to the end. We're on the section of the 6 perfections. And yeah, so for those who are just joining, that's what we're doing. And so we begin with some prayers, then a little bit of meditation on something related to a recent class, previous class. Then we'll launch into the actual text. So we can have on the board. Oh, okay.
To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, one thus gone, foe destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one gone to bliss, know of the world, supreme guide of beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans to you, the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. When, O supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow. With pure bodies formed supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain. Fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best supreme guide, to you I bow. With the supreme science, face like the spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not incomparable, wise one, to you I bow. Great, compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too, well established in the trainings. In the holy field, endow with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all-seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, 4 lands, sun and moon. Imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you, may all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Merit I create by listening to the Dharma. I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
So let's take a few more minutes to make sure that we're really settled in the present and have a good motivation for being here. So check your body and try to make sure you're in a comfortable position, but not too comfortable so that you fall asleep. We want to stay awake during teachings as much as possible. So keeping the back straight helps with that, sitting up straight. But that doesn't mean being tight or tense. So it's at the same time as keeping the back straight, it's good to release any tension there may be anywhere in your body, like in your shoulders. Or just check if there is any tension anywhere and see if you can let it go. Imagine it disappearing, melting, going away. And also check your mind, see if your mind is somewhere else, thinking about some other place or some other time in the past, the future, some other project, activity, problem. So if that's the case, if your mind is somewhere else, then let go of those thoughts. You can put them aside for now and pick them up again later if you want. But really try to keep your mind in the present place, present time, focused on what we're doing in this class. And then as for the motivation, if you already generated bodhicitta motivation earlier today, you can refresh that, renew that. And if you haven't yet generated such a motivation, you can do that now. Really try your best to feel the wish to benefit all living beings in the best possible way. And becoming enlightened is the best thing we can do for others, but also the best thing we can do for ourselves. And since we're looking at a text on the stages of the path to enlightenment, showing what we need to do to become enlightened, really try your best to have that as your motivation. Wish to become a fully enlightened Buddha for the benefit of all living beings. And then for the meditation, recently we went through the section of the text on the perfection of joyous effort. which is taking delight in virtue, being happy, joyful about doing what is virtuous. And there are various obstacles to having joyous effort, mainly laziness, and there are different kinds of laziness, one of which is the laziness of discouragement, where we feel discouraged about our practice, about following the path to enlightenment. And if we're not careful, that kind of thought can grow, and we might even get to the point of wanting to give up our practice. Like it's just too hard. So see if you can remember ever having such feelings of discouragement. And are you able to see how harmful that state of mind is? How it has the potential to lead to just abandoning your practice, abandoning the path to enlightenment, abandoning sentient beings. They're too hard to help. So, fortunately, there are things we can do to remedy that state of mind, that feeling of discouragement. So, kind of depends on why you feel discouraged. But one way that happens is if we don't fully believe in our potential for growth and change, our potential for attaining enlightenment, or also other beings' potential for attaining enlightenment. So even if they're behaving really badly right now, that's not something permanent, not how they will be for all of time, but all of us, all living beings have Buddha nature. Buddha said that, that every living being can become a fully enlightened Buddha because the afflictions, the negative states of mind that we have right now aren't permanent. They're not a permanent part of the mind, but they're more like clouds that temporarily obscure the sky, but they're not things that will be there forever. So contemplate that with regard to yourself, to others, or to both, and see if you can generate a sense of confidence that no matter how bad things may seem at the moment, they're not going to be like that forever. But we all have the potential to change and emerge from an afflicted state of mind and even reach the state of being totally pure, state of enlightenment or awakening. And it's also helpful to contemplate impermanence, the impermanent nature of things like ourselves, others, and our afflictions, the things that prevent us from progressing along the path. So these are impermanent by nature. They change moment by moment. They're not permanent things that will be there forever and ever and ever. So contemplating impermanence, getting more of a sense of that, also helps loosen up any feelings of discouragement we might have, like, oh, I just can't do this. Oh, this is impossible. But remember that things change. And also, discouragement itself is impermanent. It's sometimes there, but sometimes not. Sometimes you feel a lot of confidence, resilience, and not at all discouraged about practice. Now see if you can conclude that discouragement is harmful and be on the lookout for it. And when it does arise, when you notice it in your mind, don't let it stay there and grow, but do what you can to apply remedies to it and change your mind into the opposite of confidence and joyous effort. And I think it can also help to explore what causes and conditions led to the feeling of discouragement. Like, why did it arise? What was going on in your mind, or what was going on in your life that led to those feelings? That could be helpful too, because then you can prepare yourself for the future, try to avoid having those causes and conditions in the future that would lead to a sense of discouragement. So a lot of things that you can explore. Like, I think we talked about this earlier. One cause of discouragement is having unrealistic expectations, which we often have. I can see people nodding their heads, like thinking, oh, this will be easy. I can do it, quickly and easily. I can get enlightened easily. Um, so that's not very realistic to think that way. We have the potential for reaching enlightenment. It's definitely possible, but I wouldn't say it's easy and quick. I mean, just think about the Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, and how he spent many lifetimes, many, 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 many lifetimes working for enlightenment. He didn't, it didn't happen like that. And so, yeah, that's the reality. It takes time, it takes effort. And so that can help to, you know, I mean, we need to have enthusiasm and joyous effort about attaining that goal, but at the same time, realistic assessment of how long it's going to take. And the Dalai Lama says, yeah, even though they say sometimes in the teachings that you can reach enlightenment in one lifetime, but that's very rare, extremely rare for anyone to do it in one lifetime. And those who do reach enlightenment in one lifetime had many, many lives, previous lives, where they were practicing the path. So it's actually, a little dubious to have that kind of saying of reaching enlightenment in one lifetime. I don't think anyone is able to do that. It takes many lifetimes. So he says it's better to think in terms of spending numerous lives working for enlightenment rather than, it's going to happen quickly, soon, this life. Um, so we have to balance, have the energy, the determination to follow the path, but at the same time, not be sort of grasping at getting results quickly and easily. And just having this joyous effort to keep practicing, however long it takes, however much time and energy it takes. I will keep going in that direction. So there's a lot of work to do to generate joyous effort. So that was, a previous topic. And then we went on to the fifth perfection of meditative stabilization, also known as concentration. And that was covered briefly at this point in the text. Later, we'll get into a much more extensive explanation of that perfection. But there was something in the book that we, page 265, if you have a copy of the book, right in the middle of the page, it says, it explains the nature of meditative stabilization, what it actually is. And here in this translation of the text, it says, it is a mind that abides single-pointedly on any suitable virtuous object. And I questioned the way that's translated because other translations, including Geshe Sopa's explanation, puts the word virtuous with the mind rather than with the object. And I personally felt more comfortable with that because I think, the mind needs to be virtuous, but the object doesn't have to be virtuous. So I've been thinking more about that and also doing a little bit of research, not finished, but, and I think there was some discussion about this point in class last Friday with Venerable children, also about the mind or the object being virtuous. But one thing is, meditative stabilization starts with calm abiding or shamatha or serenity. So that's, the first point at which one has this particular state of mind. And when you have that state of mind, when you're in a meditative state with calm abiding, with shamatha, there's pliancy, right? Pliancy is present. So what kind of mental factor is pliancy? It's a virtuous mental factor. So if there's a virtuous mental factor present in the mind, what happens to the mind? It's virtuous, right? So even if you have just one virtuous mental factor present at any given moment with any given state of mind, that whole mind becomes virtuous. The main mind plus any other mental factors that are present at that moment, they all become virtuous. It's like, a virtuous mental factor colors the mind, making it virtuous. Right. So from that point of view, then I think we have to say that meditative stabilization is necessarily a virtuous state of mind. And I think there's other virtuous mental factors as well, like equanimity. which you start having even when the eighth stage, I think, eighth stage of calm abiding, you have equanimity, and that's also a virtuous mental factor. Yeah, so even before achieving shamatha, you already have a virtuous state of mind when you're meditating to attain shamatha. Does that make sense what I'm saying? And also in Abhidharma Kosha, which is by Vasubandhu, um, he talks about something called concentration vows, which I've never heard of anywhere else. Have you? In other texts? Which texts? Oh, in Chinese, okay. But in Tibetan texts, I haven't come across that topic of concentration vows. But I've also haven't come across any refutation of that, because Abhidharma Kosha is written according to the Vaibhashika school. It's explaining the Vaibhashika tenets. And some of their tenets are refuted by higher schools. So you often come across some texts, like even in Lamrim, the Lamrim text, they'll say, according to Vaibhashika, da 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 da, but this is wrong. Right? But I never came across that with regard to concentration vows. So that seems to indicate that, it's not wrong, that it is accepted also by the higher schools. And I'm really interested in this topic of concentration vows. I'd like to learn more about it. But so what they are, they're not vows like our pratimoksha vows, which we take in front of a teacher or a preceptor, upadhyaya in Sanskrit. So there, we have to actually say, I will keep these vows. Yeah. That's how pratimoksha vows. I will not kill, I will not steal, and so on. So concentration vows aren't like that. We don't take them, but they are said to arise spontaneously when the mind is in a state of meditative stabilization. Yeah, and that starts again with shamatha, calm abiding. So when the mind is in that kind of meditative state with shamatha or even higher meditative states, these concentration vows will just arise spontaneously, and that the nature of them, it's actually defined as the morality or the ethics included in the form realm. So they are form realm ethics, which, like they say in the form realm, beings who are in the form realm never do any of the 10 non-virtuous actions. Yeah, they don't even have the inclination, the thought to kill, steal. Wouldn't that be great? No school shootings, no church shootings, no lying. I mean, none of those things even ever happen in the form realm. And that's because of this state of mind, of a form realm mind, which is this natural kind of abandonment of the 10 non-virtuous actions. Yeah. So that's what concentration vows are. It's like when your mind is in a state of meditative stabilization, it just naturally doesn't engage in any of the 10 non-virtuous actions. And that means that you're engaging in the 10 virtuous actions. You're creating virtue, right? So from that point of view as well, I don't know if you follow what I'm saying, but having concentration vows in meditative stabilization also means that that state of mind is virtuous, necessarily virtuous. And again, that starts with shamatha, because shamatha is a form realm mind, right? You heard that. So even if you're a person who's in the desire realm, your body is a desire realm body, but when you're abiding in shamatha, your mind is in the form realm. It's like a different realm, a different state of mind altogether. And you have it's naturally virtuous. So these are just thoughts that I have. I don't know if they make sense, but I'm just, you know, yeah, it just seems to me that the state of mind of meditative stabilization has to be a virtuous state of mind. Can't be anything other than virtuous. And I heard Venerable mention something about Milarepa and how he had achieved shamatha, and yet he still, committed some negative actions. I haven't heard before that he did achieve shamatha. Maybe that's true. But I would think that when your mind is in that state of shamatha, you would not be able to do anything non-virtuous, right? Eh, Also, just because it's a non-conceptual mind, you're not having any thoughts. So you wouldn't have any thoughts coming up. I'm going to practice some black magic and do something to get back at people. So that wouldn't even happen. However, once you arise from that state, you come out of that meditative state, because you're still an ordinary being. You haven't completely eliminated your afflictions. You can still have anger and attachment and other afflictions. And so those could arise, and then you might engage in some non-virtuous actions. But that would be separate from the time when you're in meditative stabilization, when you're in a state of shamatha. Does that make sense? So you can, and I've heard stories as well, contemporary stories of sadhus in India, some kind of innocent, naive Western tourists in India encountering sadhus who have powers, who have like supernormal powers, and will sometimes use them to do harmful things, even stealing or sexually abusing them. Um, and so to have those kind of supernormal powers, you must have achieved shamatha and then on top of that done other practices to develop those supernormal powers. Yeah, so it shows that even someone with supernormal powers or with, the ability to practice black magic, um, is still capable of doing harmful things, of doing negative things, but that would be outside of meditative state, not while you're sitting there with your mind in a state of shamatha. Yeah. So just having shamatha doesn't mean all your afflictions go away forever. When you're abiding in that state, your afflictions aren't running wild in a mind like they are with us ordinary beings. So they're just very much subdued, temporarily suppressed. But once you arise from your meditative state, then it's possible for afflictions to arise again. You can get angry and so on and so forth, so they can still arise. So that's why we need not just, meditative stabilization, good concentration, but we need wisdom as well. So anyway, my conclusion that where I'm at this point in time is I'm really sure that meditative stabilization, and including shamatha, is a virtuous state of mind. However, I don't think the object has to be virtuous, because it could be the breath. You can develop shamatha using the breath, which isn't a virtuous object. There's also, they tell some story about somebody who achieved shamatha using an animal horn, like a goat horn or a sheep horn. Have you heard that? It's in some of the texts. I don't know. Somebody, just meditating. I guess they were staring at a animal horn they found out in the forest somewhere, used that and achieved shamatha using that. So that's certainly not a virtuous object. So you don't need to have a virtuous object in order to achieve shamatha and, use as your object of meditation for achieving shamatha. So the object doesn't have to be virtuous, although it's good to use a virtuous object, of course, if you know how to do that, like the image of the Buddha. That's a much better object to use than an animal horn. So it's good to have a virtuous object, but it isn't necessary. But the mind that is meditating, that achieves shamatha, that mind needs to be virtuous. But I'm still, I want to look into this more and see if what I'm thinking is correct. Does that make sense, what I'm saying? There's also this story in Pabonka Rinpoche's Lamrim, Liberation in the Palm of the Hand, about some yogi who had achieved, really, really strong concentration. I don't know if it was shamatha or even higher, maybe the first concentration, and was sitting in a cave or his hut or whatever for a long time. They say when you achieve shamatha, you can remain in a meditative state for hours, for days, even weeks, even months, just meditating. And so this yogi was doing that, and his hair grew. He wasn't a monk, so his hair grew really, really long, and his body was just sitting there completely still. So some mice or rats or something came along, and they started eating his hair and taking his hair, probably to make nests. Oh, look at this stuff. This will make a nice nest for my babies, or something like that. And then at a certain point, the yogi came out of his meditation and he saw what the rats had done, and he got angry. You messed up my hair. So that shows that, yeah, you can achieve this very high state of meditative concentration and be really peaceful and blissful. But, that alone doesn't eliminate your afflictions. Your afflictions can still be there and still arise when you're not in that meditative state. So that's why we need wisdom. So then last week we did start looking at wisdom, benefits of wisdom. And I was thinking how this is kind of very timely right now because we're about to receive teachings from Serkon Rinpoche on Lama Tsongkhapa's text, The Praise to Dependent Arising, which he wrote it right after he realized emptiness. He gained this wisdom realizing emptiness and just, wrote this text praising the Buddha for teaching dependent arising, because it's by understanding dependent arising that we can realize emptiness. So we're really fortunate that we'll have these teachings. And so again, the section on wisdom at this point in the book is short, and then there'll be a much more extensive section later. But here, Lama Tsongkhapa is going through different benefits of wisdom, because if we can understand the benefits of wisdom, we'll have much more energy, enthusiasm to learn it and gain the realization of it, because it's hard work. It's not easy to understand emptiness. There's different kinds of wisdom, as explained here. There's wisdom of conventionalities, which can include things like technical arts, learning how to draw, learning how to cook, and so on, learning how to build something. So that's also kind of wisdom. So wisdom with regard to just conventional phenomena, conventional skills and knowledge. Medicine is another example of conventional wisdom. So there is conventional wisdom, but the main wisdom we need to develop to progress along the path is the wisdom of ultimate truth, which is emptiness, according to this school. So that's not so easy. So we started going through the benefits, which are on page 267, and there's a slide here. The first benefit is that it's the root of all good qualities. So on the basis of wisdom, we can develop many other good qualities. And then we started looking at the second benefit, which there says it enables a bodhisattva to not be perturbed by good or bad conditions and to be skilled in methods such as generosity. So with wisdom, a bodhisattva will be able to engage in whatever they have to do to progress along the path, starting with the practice of generosity, the first perfection, and so on, and not be perturbed or discouraged. We could also say getting discouraged with regard to the things you have to do to follow the path and reach enlightenment. And so I'll just start again from that section. Lama Tsongkhapa says, the complete purity of the first 5 perfections, generosity and so forth, depends on wisdom. And complete purity, usually complete purity, well, not usually, I don't know, but anyway, sometimes that term complete purity means being free of grasping at inherent existence. Yeah. So ideally, as a bodhisattva is even practicing generosity, ethics, and so on, ideally they do these practices within the understanding of emptiness. There's no inherently existing I who's giving this gift. There's no inherently existing gift that I'm giving, no inherently existing recipient that I'm giving the gift to. So having this awareness of emptiness of inherent existence with all the different factors involved in an act of giving, and so on, with all the other perfections. So that's the ideal, and that's often the meaning of complete purity, being free of grasping at inherent existence. But some of these examples also seem to be talking about purity in other ways, like just doing things correctly, being free of mistakes or faulty ways of doing things. So anyway, wisdom enables our practice of generosity and so forth to be pure and free of faults and mistakes. And in that way, it's more sure that these practices will bring us to enlightenment. So he gives an example of generosity. It says, although a bodhisattva gives his own flesh to someone who asks him for it, like offering a leaf from a medicinal plant, he does not do it with the discursive thoughts of pride, discouragement, and so forth. Rather, he does it out of the suchness manifested by wisdom. So what that means is, we learned already that when we practice giving, ideally, we're willing to give everything, even our body or parts of our body. But they say, well, that kind of practice is really meant for advanced bodhisattvas and not something we have to do right from the beginning. Although giving blood is something you can do without too much difficulty. But yeah, we start by giving material things like, food and money and clothes. But yeah, giving those things, and then gradually we get used to giving, and our generosity grows, our love and compassion grows, our wisdom grows, and eventually it is possible to get to the point where they say a bodhisattva can give a part of their body, like their arm, in the same way we would give a carrot. It's like no attachment and no sense of self grasping and self-centeredness and so on. But just, you want my arm? Here it is. Take it, just very easily. And this ability largely depends on the development of wisdom, understanding, emptiness of the I, emptiness of the body, emptiness of things. So with that understanding of emptiness, it becomes easy to give parts of the body without these other afflictions like pride, discouragement, and so forth. Then secondly is ethics. When he practices ethics for the welfare of others, he purifies his ethics with the wisdom that sees the flaws of both cyclic existence and the peace of nirvana. So here, this meaning of wisdom is more conventional wisdom, not so much the ultimate, but just the conventional wisdom that sees the flaws of samsara. And yeah, samsara is just so full of suffering and problems, and something to be freed from, something to get out of rather than something to stay in. So practicing ethics with that motivation to get out of samsara, but also seeing the flaws of the peace of nirvana, meaning just attaining nirvana for yourself. Not being concerned about others, but just, I want to get out of samsara. I want to get to nirvana just for myself. So seeing the flaws of that attitude or that motivation, that is faulty for a bodhisattva, someone wanting to attain enlightenment, that is something to be avoided. So seeing the flaws of those two possibilities, both samsara and peace, or the peace of nirvana just for oneself alone. So recognizing those flaws and steering a path between those, practicing ethics for the attainment of Buddhahood, full enlightenment Buddhahood, for the benefit of all sentient beings, to be able to help all sentient beings get out of samsara. So that's more like conventional wisdom, wisdom of conventionalities rather than ultimate wisdom. And then the third example is patience. His mind is subdued by means of the wisdom realizing the faults of impatience and the excellent qualities of patience. And so he is not consumed by offense and suffering. So again, I think that's more like conventional wisdom, just understanding that, yeah, the impatience or anger, hatred, getting angry when encountering difficult people or people harming you and so on, seeing the faults of getting angry and the benefits of practicing patience. So being able to see those and then having this determination to be patient no matter what happens, practicing patience. So that, yeah, again, wisdom enables the bodhisattva to do that. Wisdom understanding those comparative faults of impatience or anger and benefits of patience. And then number 4 is with regard to joyous effort. By means of wisdom, he understands well the basis for undertaking joyous effort and exerts himself in that, whereby there is great progress on the path. So again, this is more like conventional wisdom, wisdom of conventionalities, understanding what joyous effort is, how to develop it, how to overcome the obstacles to joyous effort, the different kinds of laziness. So we just had a very extensive section on that, on those aspects of the path. So just having the wisdom, understanding all of those things will enable the bodhisattva to cultivate joyous effort more and more and more and overcome the obstacles to joyous effort, like laziness, discouragement, and so on. And then next is with regard to meditative stabilization. By means of the wisdom relying on a process of reasoning, he achieves the supreme joyful bliss of the meditative stabilization that abides in the meaning of suchness. So this is the real purpose of developing meditative stabilization, a concentrated mind, shamatha, calm abiding, super strong concentration. Is the purpose isn't to just remain in that state of mind, enjoying the bliss of concentration, but to apply that skill. It's like a tool, being able to concentrate the mind, apply that to the true nature of things, which is emptiness, by using reasoning. So we have to use reasoning, like the reasoning of dependent arising, in order to understand emptiness. Get that object of emptiness in our mind, and then apply concentration, this concentration we developed, apply that to that object of emptiness. And it's in that way that it's possible to overcome the afflictions, get out of samsara and reach enlightenment. So that's going to come later, how to actually do that, how to cultivate separately, how to cultivate shamatha, calm abiding, and then wisdom, and then combine the two, the union of calm abiding and special insight. So those are just examples of how by bringing wisdom into the practice, a bodhisattva is able to practice the other 5 perfections in a much more perfect way, more correct way, free of faults, free of mistakes. Okay, so that was the second benefit. The third benefit is these points here are actually from an outline which I got from Geshe Jampa Gyatso's commentary. It's actually he was using a Tibetan text which has kind of an outline that isn't necessarily here in this book, but I just thought it was helpful to add it. So the third of the benefits, according to the outline, is accomplishing without contradiction actions that appear contradictory. So that'll become more clear as we go through the book. So it says, those endowed with wisdom can accomplish without any contradiction 2 excellent qualities that appear to be opposed. And I question the translation here, where it says excellent qualities. I think it may be better to just say qualities, because some of these qualities are not excellent qualities. And the term is yunten in Tibetan, and it does sometimes mean excellent qualities, but I think it can also just mean ordinary qualities. So that'll get more clear as we go along. So the first example is, were a bodhisattva to become a universal monarch with power over the 4 continents, the minister of wisdom would prevent his succumbing to the sway of desirable objects. Okay, so it's possible that a bodhisattva could be in that position of being a universal monarch. They call it Chakravartin king. I don't know. In Buddhist cosmology, they talk about the universe with Mount Meru and the 4 continents and so on. Like when we make the mandala offering, so they say that's how the universe is. And there's a kind of being called a universal monarch who rules over, this whole thing. So not just the ruler of one country or even one planet, but this whole system, this whole world system, which is quite vast. And you have to create a lot of merit, huge amount of merit, to be born as a universal monarch. But it's possible that a bodhisattva would take such a birth and be a universal monarch, and then they would have this incredible power over the 4 continents and also a huge amount of wealth and so on and so forth. And so, being in a position of power like that, power and wealth, it's very easy to get caught up in attachment, right? Attachment to your power, attachment to your wealth. And but in the case of a bodhisattva, that would not happen. Because of their wisdom. Their wisdom enables them to recognize the dangers of attachment and also the impermanent nature of things like wealth and power, and so they would not fall into that trap, that mistake of having attachment to their position and their wealth and so forth. So there's two qualities there. The 2 qualities are, on the one hand, this position of power and wealth, having a huge amount of power and wealth, where there's the danger of let me see, trying to remember how that goes. But not coming under the control of attachment to desirable objects. So there's two things there. And like I say, it doesn't really seem that they are both virtuous. Having power and wealth, I mean, it's kind of neutral in itself. It doesn't necessarily have to become a problem. Yeah. In the case of a bodhisattva, or the Dalai Lama, for example, he's really, really famous and people make lots of offerings to him. He could be very wealthy and he could be attached to his wealth and attached to the fame and the renown and the praise and so on and so forth. But that doesn't happen in his case because his mind is beyond that. So there's this position, which is a little tricky. You could fall into attachment and get on a power trip, so on. But that doesn't happen. So there's two things there. A situation where, you have these enjoyments, but being able to avoid the and the dangers, the traps of that. So Geshe Gyatso in his commentary explains this point. He says, actions that appear to be contradictory to ordinary beings can be performed without contradiction by those who possess wisdom. In other words, two apparently contradictory qualities, one that appears to ordinary beings as something to be developed, and one that appears as something to be avoided, can be accomplished by a bodhisattva. So two things that might seem contradictory in the case of a bodhisattva, they don't have a problem with that because of their wisdom. And then a second example here is likewise, although his love that sees sentient beings as likable is very strong, it is not even slightly mixed with attachment. So a bodhisattva, because they want to help all sentient beings, they want to make connection with as many people and beings as possible. And a good connection, like really get close to sentient beings so that they can teach them and guide them and influence them to go in a positive direction. So bodhisattvas, are sociable. They like to be connected with people and in a very warm and caring way. Okay. But they're able to do that without attachment. For us ordinary beings, that's really hard to do, right? It's really hard to have close relationships with people, but not have attachment. For us, love and attachment are just like so mixed. It's very hard to have one without the other. But a bodhisattva is able to do that because of their wisdom, probably mainly the wisdom understanding emptiness. There's no inherently existing I, and there's no inherently existing other. And so that would enable them to not have attachment to all these people and beings that they are, getting close to, getting involved with. And then the next one is, although he has lasting and intense compassion that cannot bear the suffering of sentient beings, he is without the laziness that is oppressed by sorrow and that does not delight in virtue. So the compassion of a bodhisattva sees the suffering of all sentient beings and is very much concerned about helping all of them, but doesn't fall into, here it says, the laziness that is oppressed by sorrow. Another term for this might be personal distress. I think Venerable talks about that. Dalai Lama talks about that. That's when you open up to the suffering of others, but then you get depressed about it. You get distressed about it. Oh, there's just so much suffering, and I'm trying to help. I'm trying to eliminate it, but I can't. And then you can, become overwhelmed by sadness and depression, and that can lead to wanting to give up, wanting to close off and not be involved anymore with the suffering of others. So that doesn't happen with the bodhisattva because of their wisdom. And they're able to maintain a balance between compassion and still having joyous effort of working for sentient beings. The next one, although he possesses immeasurable joy, he is without the restlessness that distracts the mind from a focal object. So having immeasurable joy, which is, feeling happy about the happiness of others and also about the virtue that others are creating. So joy is it's kind of a, not a very calm state of mind. It's kind of a little, well, for us anyway, it's a little bit excited, feeling joyful. But in the case of a bodhisattva is able to feel that kind of joy, taking delight in the happiness of others, the virtue others are creating, and so on. So is able to have that state of mind, but without restlessness. Restlessness is also called excitement, like when we're trying to meditate, but our mind just can't stay focused because it's just bubbling and running here and there. So Bodhisattva is able to avoid that problem, have joy, but without restlessness that distracts the mind. Next says, although he possesses great and continuous equanimity, he does not neglect the welfare of beings even for an instant. So equanimity means being able to have equal concern, love, and compassion for every living being without exception, without excluding anyone. And it can be a little similar to indifference. In fact, it said, indifference is like a near enemy of equanimity. It looks a little bit like that, but it isn't. It isn't quite the same. Indifference is a sort of, not really caring about others. So equanimity is this kind of calm, balanced state of mind that's able to see everyone equally, care about everyone equally, but that doesn't fall into this other state of mind, which is a sort of uncaring indifference of neglecting the welfare of others. So this is all owing to wisdom, because wisdom eliminates the obstacles to accomplishing a balanced strength. So it's due to wisdom that a bodhisattva is able to engage in these practices and stay on the right track, stay in a balanced way. And not fall into mistakes, not have their practice become faulty or mistaken. So wisdom, eliminates obstacles to accomplishing a balanced strength. And then the fourth benefit is seeing the two truths as non-contradictory. So this is on the next page, page 268. There's a quote from a text, Praise of the One Worthy of Praise, which says, they accord with conventionalities without discarding ultimate reality. Ultimate reality meaning emptiness, ultimate truth. Lama Tsongkhapa says, thus there is no need to discard ultimate reality, the great certainty one has gained that not even a mere particle of the referent object whose signs are being apprehended is established. So that sentence is a little hard to understand, but basically it's saying that a bodhisattva is able to engage in conventional truth, understand how things exist conventionally on the conventional level, and at the same time understand ultimate truth. So they don't see the two truths as contradictory or incompatible. So I'll just read the rest of that paragraph and then read something from Geshe Zopa. That is not contradictory to, but in agreement with the fact that conventionalities are found through a profound certainty that individual effects arise from their individual inner and outer causes and conditions. Although these are grossly contradictory for those without a sharp mind, for those who possess wisdom, they are compatible and not contradictory. So Geshe Zopa's commentary on this says, it appears to ordinary people that conventional truth and ultimate truth are contradictory. The ultimate truth is that every phenomenon lacks inherent or ultimate existence. Everything is empty of inherent existence. The highest wisdom is the realization of this emptiness. From the perspective of ultimate truth, things are merely imputed. They only nominally exist. Conventional truth is how things appear to an ordinary mind. We see things as real. They appear to exist in their own right. There's a subject over here and an object over there. They seem completely, disconnected, inherently existing. There's cause and effect. There are actual qualities like good and bad. And all these things ultimately exist, really exist. They're really true, just as they appear. So this is how ordinary beings see things. The conventional understanding seems to be the complete this conventional understanding seems to be the complete opposite of the ultimate truth, that everything is empty of being real, true, or inherently existing. When we are first taught that nothing, not even the smallest atom, inherently or ultimately exists, the two levels of truth seem totally incompatible. To ordinary people, it seems that if we believe in emptiness, then conventional things such as causality, qualitative differences, and so on are simply imaginary. Or if we accept conventional truth, then ultimate truth couldn't possibly be valid. So this is how ordinary people, which probably includes ourselves, see things. That, ultimate truth, that things are empty of inherent existence, and conventional truth, the way things appear to be, these are incompatible. These are opposite. They contradict each other. And they say, like, even when you start getting some experiences of emptiness, you get some insight into emptiness, then it can seem as if, well, because things are empty of inherent existence, they don't exist at all. There's nothing there, no existence, even on the conventional level. So they say it's actually very hard to see the two truths as compatible, as non-contradictory. In fact, I don't know if it's in this book. I think it's in the bigger book, the Lamrim Chenmo. Lama Tsongkhapa says something in there that I found quite shocking. He said there's very few people who are able to see the two truths as non-contradictory. So it's not easy. Actually not easy. We might think, oh yeah, the two truths, they don't contradict each other. But that's just on the intellectual level, without much actual experience. But when you get some experience of emptiness, it is very hard to hang on to the conventional existence of things. So it's a gradual process. Geshe Zopa says, first we have to understand emptiness through study and so on. And then eventually we'll get an inferential realization of emptiness, where we do realize emptiness, but it's still more intellectual or conceptual. Then eventually get the direct, non-conceptual realization of emptiness. And he says when we have the direct, non-conceptual realization of emptiness, then the contradiction between the two levels of truth is completely resolved. We know that nothing exists inherently, but at the same time, we can accept causality, cause and effect. good actions lead to happiness, bad actions lead to suffering, and so on. So there is this danger that when you get some insight into emptiness, you can lose touch with that. And, you know, even some people even deny karma, cause and effect. That's dangerous, because then you can think, well, anything goes. I can do anything. But that's a misunderstanding. So wisdom, the bodhisattva's wisdom, enables them to maintain this balance between the two truths, and not see them as contradictory, but instead see them as both valid and even mutually supportive, mutually, what's the word? Yeah. Non-contradictory, complementary. Yeah. Okay, so I'll do the next one and then maybe leave some time for questions. So the last one, the fifth point, is seeing that permissions and prohibitions are not contradictory. So the same text, the praise of the one worthy of praise, also says, regarding permissions and prohibitions, some of your words are definitive, whereas others are not. Still, there is no contradiction among them. Thus, there are many contradictory permissions and prohibitions in the higher and lower vehicles and in Sutra and Tantra, and at the same time, they are to be practiced by a single person. Those without a sharp mind who seek the meaning of the countless scriptures see these two as contradictory, whereas the skilled do not. This too is owing to wisdom. So among the teachings of the Buddha, there's a huge amount of teachings the Buddha gave to different people in different times, different circumstances. And, certain teachings or advice that he gives at one time to one group of people, and then other teachings he gives to others at another time, can seem contradictory. And so if you don't have wisdom, then you might think, oh, these are contradictory. You might even think the Buddha didn't know what he was talking about. He's contradicting himself. And it's also hard to understand how to practice, how to put into practice the Buddhist teachings. So to give some examples, Geshe Zopa gives one example. He says, monastics, those of us who are monks and nuns, are supposed to be content with a simple lifestyle, with just, a minimum number of belongings, and also to have few desires, not to just be always wanting more and better and so on. This is to help us overcome attachment and self-centeredness. Okay, so on the other hand, for those who have gone beyond self-centeredness and sincerely act for the welfare of all sentient beings, so bodhisattvas, those who sincerely want to follow the bodhisattva's path, benefit as many beings as possible, reach enlightenment, to help all sentient beings, for those who have those attitudes, those intentions very sincerely, then it's useful to have a lot of things that you can then share with others, right? So when sentient beings are hungry or poor or need a place to stay or whatever, you can say, come, stay with me. I'll give you food. I'll give you money. I'll give you whatever. Yeah. So it's useful, yeah, to benefit others, to have a lot of things. And so this can seem kind of contradictory. Yeah, well, here the Buddha says just have a few things, don't have a lot of things. And here he says have a lot of things so you can benefit others. But it's just a question of where you're at in your practice, where you're at in your spiritual development. And for those of us who still have attachment and still have a lot of work to do to generate genuine compassion and love and generosity and so on and so forth without self-centeredness, it is better to live a simple lifestyle. But then for those who've gone beyond that, like Geshe-Zopa says, who have gone beyond self-centeredness and attachment and really are driven by compassion and love for others, then having a lot of things isn't a problem, isn't a danger, and in fact, it's beneficial for being able to help others. So that's one example of, things that may appear contradictory, but it's not. And wisdom enables us to understand that. And then other examples. So there are a couple of bodhisattva precepts, the secondary precepts that are related to this. For example, number 10, the 10th secondary precept of a bodhisattva is about doing only limited actions to benefit sentient beings, such as strictly keeping Vinaya rules in situations where not doing so would be of greater benefit to others. So our bodhisattva, even if we have pratimoksha vows, pratimoksha precepts, our bodhisattvas are said to be more important to, what's the word? Supersede. That's what I thought. Yeah, supersede the pratimoksha vows, the Vinaya rules. And so yeah, if there's situations where for the benefit of others, sincerely, to help others, it would be useful to not keep our pratimoksha vows so strictly. Then we actually should do that. We should loosen our pratimoksha vows for the benefit of others. So there's actually a bodhisattva precept about that. Yeah. And the next one is even more sort of strong. It's number 11 says, not doing virtuous actions of body and speech with loving compassion when circumstances deem it necessary to benefit others. So this is talking about actually doing something non-virtuous, like the first 7 non-virtuous actions: killing, stealing, lying, and so on. And so if there's a situation where it would be beneficial for sentient beings to commit one of those actions, we actually should, with the right motivation, of course, with love and compassion. So you probably heard the story about the previous life of the Buddha when he was a ship captain. He was a bodhisattva at that time, and he was the captain of a ship. And then there was someone on the ship who was plotting to kill the others. So most of the passengers were merchants who had a lot of goods, like jewels and things that they were bringing back home to sell. And there was someone who was plotting to kill all these merchants and steal their goods. And the bodhisattva, because he had probably clairvoyance, he could see what was going on in this person's mind and wanted to stop this would-be murderer, not only out of compassion for the people who would be killed, the merchants, but also for that person himself, because it'd be such negative karma, huge amount of negative karma to do that, kill all those people, take all their goods, and that would bring a lot of suffering to that person. So he wanted to stop this action from happening, and it seems like the only way to do so would be to kill that person. So he killed. He knowing that it was wrong to kill, knowing that killing was going to create negative karma that would bring suffering to himself in the future. But he was willing to take on that karma and the suffering, to prevent all the other suffering of these other people. So it was great compassion, selfless compassion. I will take on the bad karma. I will take on the suffering in order to stop this negative action from happening. And it said that because his mind was so pure, his motivation was so pure, so free of self-centeredness and No anger, no anger or hatred at all, only compassion. I'm just saying that was the only way to stop this mass murder. And he did it. And it said that because his mind was so pure, it actually wasn't negative. It didn't turn out to be negative karma at all. So that's just an example of, a bodhisattva doing something that's normally prohibited, right? Killing is definitely something we should avoid doing. But in certain circumstances, with the right motivation, totally selfless compassion and love, then a bodhisattva should do those kind of actions. So, and not seeing that there's anything contradictory about that. So with wisdom, having wisdom, both conventional and also ultimate wisdom, would enable the bodhisattva to do this. But we need to be careful and, know well our mind and our motivation and our level of, compassion and lack of self-centeredness. Because otherwise it's easy to kind of find excuses and think, okay, I'm a monastic, but yeah, if I go to that party, there's this big party in town, people are going to be drinking and drugging and making music. I can go and connect them with the Dharma. And so, yeah, and I'll go in my robes, so they'll see my robes and that'll connect them. But you still have attachment. You still have self-centeredness. It's not really genuine pure motivation. So yeah, we do need to be careful and only do those kind of actions when our level of compassion and altruism is highly developed, and our wisdom, ideally. So wisdom would make such actions pure rather than impure. So those are 5 benefits of wisdom. And I thought we might get further along in the text, but talking too much. Any questions about any of this material or comments or stories you want to share? Seichen?
Venerable, I'm a little confused about how giving one's body or an important part of one's body would be as easy as giving a vegetable, because like, would a bodhisattva give away their arm to someone who just simply asked for it and had no reason that they needed it, just out of a whim to see if they would do it or something?
There are stories like that. I think there's, I don't know, I don't know where, but I think it was even one of the gods who was like testing the bodhisattva to see how much generosity they really had. And so kind of manifested in this form and said, please give me your arm. And they didn't really need it. Yeah, it was just to test them. Isn't there some story like that? Yeah. So, um, I don't really know. I mean, I'm certainly not at that level where I would be able to do that kind of practice. But perhaps the bodhisattva has enough development of their mind that they could actually see into the other person's mind, know what their motivation is, know whether they really need it or not. Because I think there was something that earlier when we were going through that section, something from Geshe Sopa about how Bodhisattva doesn't just blindly give like that, but they would determine, is this useful? Is this really something useful? So, yeah. Is it more useful to give my arm or to keep it? Because with my arm, I can do a lot of good. So, yeah, they would kind of weigh up the pros and the cons of doing an action rather than just impulsively doing it. Another question?
Can I follow up on that?
Yeah.
Would that be the same as, would they do that for giving a carrot as well, Venerable?
Well, yeah, because when we went through the section on giving, there was also certain considerations about what to give, who to give to, and so on and so forth. Not so much with carrots, but like a gun, you know, if somebody asks for a gun, that probably wouldn't be a suitable thing to give because they might use that gun to harm others or to harm themselves. Or giving alcohol to someone who has taken a precept to not drink alcohol. Okay, so that would be unsuitable. So a bodhisattva does need to check the suitability of, you know, the person, the object, and so on and so forth, and, you know, take those things into consideration. Is this really going to be beneficial? Or with children, you know, they're always asking for things. And every time they ask for something, if you give it to them, I mean, you don't have to be a bodhisattva to realize that that's not a good idea because then yeah, they'll get spoiled and that's not good for them. So you do need to bring wisdom into your practice of generosity and so forth and do it wisely, skillfully, and not just kind of foolishly. Gyatso.
I think we talked about this last week. An object is virtuous because it can arouse virtuous mental states. So it seems like the breath or maybe a horn, if it has the capacity to arouse these virtuous mental states, calm and peace and other things, could that make it virtuous? Is that possible?
Well, like I haven't I did try once upon a time, not recently, but I did try to find an explanation of virtuous objects. And you know, what is a virtuous object? I think I even asked a teacher. You know, I just didn't really come up with any clear explanation of that. And so, yeah, I kind of have, again, doubt about even that term, virtuous object. And in this case, it seemed like the term virtuous in that Tibetan text is more, it just makes more sense to apply it to the mind rather than the object. But they do sometimes talk about virtuous objects. So yeah, it's probably objects like images of the Buddha, holy objects, and so on that from their side do have some power, not inherently, you know, but there is some power there. We've been learning about this, filling the Buddha statue, all the incredible things that go inside of a Buddha statue, you know, and then those objects are blessed, you know, the mantras and so on, they're blessed. And so then because of those causes and conditions, then that object, the statue or the stupa, does have this kind of power or energy that people can feel. Yeah. I was once in Borobudur in Indonesia, this amazing stupa that was built over 1,000 years ago, and it's really powerful. And I was with a group of people from Singapore, and there was one young woman who was like kind of really skeptical, fairly new and very skeptical about things like this. And she said, I don't know, but I feel something here, you know, and like, why is that? Why do I feel this here? You know, well, power of holy objects. So people feel it, even if they're, you know, they have doubts or they don't have strong faith in the Buddhist teaching, but they can still feel something. And so, yeah, I think certain objects do have, because of causes and conditions, they do have some power or energy to benefit the mind, help the mind be more positive, more virtuous. But I don't know if that could happen with something like the breath or a goat horn. I think you would need to have inner factors in order for your mind to become virtuous with those kinds of objects. Does that make sense? Okay, one last question, Sheldon.
I've been playing with this thing recently where I things that irritate me or you know, how we constantly create these stories about how things should go, you know, and they rarely go, you know, how we want them to go. Or they really go how I want them to go. But when those irritations come up, I try and tell myself that this is not being kind to myself, you know, this anger, irritation. And I've also been looking at, you know, your teachings about the two truths kind of, I also like try and think like when things do go wrong, try and notice it in that moment and see that this proves that, you know, dependent arising in emptiness, you know, exists, because if they didn't, things would always go the way I think they should, you know? So it's just a way to think about that, you know?
If things were not dependent arising, then they should always go the way I think, the way I want.
No, no, I'm saying when things go wrong,
Mm-hmm.
you know, instead of a problem, I've been trying to think of, well, this proves that, you know, there is an emptiness, you know, and you know what I'm saying? It's hard to explain.
Well, I mean, I guess one way would be to think,
Mm.
yeah, things are going wrong. And this is because of dependent arising.
Yeah.
Things depend on causes and conditions.
Yep.
And even though I tried to bring together all the causes and conditions for things to go the way I want, they didn't. Maybe it's because there are other causes and conditions, like I didn't have the right karma or something, something, something. You know, other causes and conditions weren't present. And so, yeah, because things are dependent on causes and conditions, therefore they're not inherently and independently existing, and therefore they're empty of inherent existence. So, like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Also, the I that wants things to go a certain way and thinks I should be able to make it happen, you know? If there was such an I, then why didn't I make things happen the way I want? So you can also look at that, the sense of I behind those kind of thoughts. An all powerful, all controlling self. Does that really exist? Check it out. Okay, so we'll stop there and dedicate the merit, positive energy, share it with all mother sentient beings.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Lusang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Niryatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.